Welcome to the Next Generation Q&A. I'm Christian Naranjo. This is Pastor Jeremy Bannister. We're taking some of your questions that you're sending in to us, and Jeremy is answering it for us biblically so that you can raise your children to grow up to be disciples of Christ. We've gotten quite a few questions in, Jeremy, and this is probably another question that a lot of parents can deal with on a daily basis with their kids, especially nowadays. We had a parent write in, how do we raise kids that really think through long-term and eternal consequences in a swipe iPhone, write and receive culture?
Wow, what a challenge. I think this is a challenge for the entire church right now. We live in such a soundbite culture that, a meme or just a 15-second explanation off of YouTube throws people's faith. And what I would say to answer this question is, as a parent, we have to, in order for us to look long term, we have to help our children fully recognize and fully understand the faith in which we're raising them in. And that takes a lot of time. There's no shortcut to that either. So the solution is no shortcut, to the problem that's here. It's going to take a lot of time in order to build this in, especially amongst the soundbite culture in which we're living in. So what do I mean by that? I mean this. We have a fundamental problem right now within America in that even among the best of the Christian denominations, only 13% of the people in the best denomination in America have a biblical worldview. So these are those who would profess to be Christians. And on just the basic fundamental level, 7 out of 8 people don't have a biblical worldview. So the problem isn't just with the children, it's with the parents. And so what we have to do is we have to train our kids to understand the Word of God as it's presented there. And that takes time. There is no shortcut for this. That takes time. There's a steadfastness that says, as a parent, I want my children to know what the Word of God says. I worked as a banker for 8 years, and we went to a conference. And one of the conferences that they had down in Savannah, it was a 2-day conference. One of the conferences down at Savannah was helping us to catch counterfeiters, both counterfeiters for money and counterfeiters for checks. The first day was about money. And we spent the first half of the day, I was so bored. I was so stinking bored. But the first half of the day was spent looking at the dollar bills that we handled as tellers all the time. And we looked, and it was showing every idiosyncrasy of them. Some of them were cool little security features that we didn't know about. Most of them were things that we knew. Yeah, it's got this on it. Yeah, it's got that on it. It's got these, these pictures or this watermark or this blank, you name it. It was there. 4 hours. We were so tired and so stinking tired of looking at those bills. And the problem was, when we left, he said, well, when we come back, we're gonna see the counterfeit. And we were all excited. Yeah, I want to see some counterfeit money, and so see what happens. And so we came back, and honestly, I think all of us were thoroughly disappointed at what we saw, because they handed us, here's all the counterfeit money, and we looked at it and like, who would be fooled by any of this? I mean, it didn't look right, it didn't feel right. I mean, it was like, and the thing about this counterfeit money that was handed to us, he said, now the money you're handling today was all taken in by tellers, all taken in by people who were working at a bank and actually took that money in. It wasn't fed through a machine where they didn't see it or anything like that. They actually handled it and took it in. And they were fooled by something. When we looked at it, it just stood out like a sore thumb. And I'll never forget what he told us. He said, the reason we spent so much time, the first half of this day, doing all of this was so that you would know the dollar bill so well that the counterfeit would stand out just like that. Because when you and I are lazy, and he was mentioning it in the form of money, but when you and I are lazy and we don't consistently go back to the original and look at it, he said, look, in your downtime, here's what you ought to be doing. You ought to be picking up those dollar bills. You ought to be consistently making yourself re-familiar with all the features of those dollar bills during your times that you're in break. Pick it up 3-4 times a day in those slow moments when you're there, so that you will never be fooled by the counterfeit that's out there. And the problem with the meme generation today is that we spent so little time building a foundation of faith where our kids understand what the Word of God actually says, and how the Word of God is put together, what it says on important things, that when a meme comes along and mentions a Bible verse that our kids are unfamiliar with, and then they go look at that Bible verse and actually it's there, it's out of context and it's out of place and it's arguing about something that's not really what that meme is talking about, but our kids don't know the difference of it. They are fooled immediately because they don't know the real thing. So they're not inoculated against the counterfeit. And that's the problem that we have in our society right now. We have a biblically illiterate generation. And so for parents, what I encourage first and foremost, your kids have got to know the Word of God. More than anything else, they've got to know the Word of God. I have plenty of reading plans to help parents walk their kids through it as early as when they start reading, as early as 3rd grade, when they're starting to read proficiently, to walk them through the Word of God. As a matter of fact, my encouragement as a youth pastor, just as a pastor in general, honestly, is that if you are a Christian parent, your kids need to be reading the Word of God by the age of 8 when they're reading in school. They need to have finished the Word of God the first time by the time they're entering mid school or junior high, which is 6th grade. Which you may say that's crazy. That I couldn't do that. Actually, you can, and it's really not that hard. And we have plans to help make that happen for you as parents, not just to walk your kids through it, but help your kids truly understand how the Word of God is put together. I mean, that's part of what this series is for. But the more your kids know the Word of God in context, the less that they're going to be fooled by the memes and other things. But make no mistake, I just gave you 3 years worth of homework, from 3rd grade to 5th grade. And if your kids are older than that, at least 2 years of homework, trying to work them through the Bible so that they'll recognize and understand what the Word of God says. That's hard work, and it's not just about reading the Word of God, but reading other books that are going to be encouraging your kids in the faith. And you can't shortcut it. That's the hard part about it, is because we live in such a generation where everything's shortcut. Everything is done in 140 characters or less, or done on 10 minutes or less on YouTube, just like the videos that we're trying to do right now. You can't shortcut this. If you want your kids to be discipled, you have to be intentional, and you have to every day be able to say, this is more important, and I'm going to work on building this up in them, so that when the counterfeit comes along and those memes come up on Facebook, which as mature believers, oftentimes I'll see those memes and that's so stupid, because I know the context, because I know what they're talking about and what they're talking against, and I know that they have no clue how the Bible's put together. And why do I know that? Because I know the Bible, because I know the Word of God, because I've trained myself to know what it really says, so that I can also recognize the counterfeit. So my prayer for you, not an easy answer, my prayer for you is keep sticking with the long-term goal of helping your kids know the Word of God fully and understand it fully, so that when they're hit by this soundbite generation, they'll recognize it for the shallow argument against Christianity that it truly is, and they'll know that the truth is much deeper than the lie that the world wants them to believe. God bless you. I hope that this helps, and we'll talk to you guys next time.